It was just after 9:30 p.m. on a quiet Thursday night. Traffic was light. Streetlights reflected off the polished black paint of a new Mercedes S-Class as it rolled smoothly through a residential stretch of road outside a wealthy suburban neighborhood. Inside the car was Marcus Reed, a 38-year-old black man, dressed casually in a dark jacket and a white shirt, hands steady on the wheel. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't swerving. He wasn't on his phone. In fact, he had just left a late dinner meeting and was heading home. Then suddenly, red and blue lights exploded in his rearview mirror. Marcus frowned slightly and checked his speed again. 35. Exactly the limit. He signaled calmly and pulled over to the curb. The police cruiser stopped behind him, engine idling. Marcus took a slow breath. He had been stopped before. Too many times for reasons that never quite made sense. The officer stepped out of the car slowly, hand resting near his belt, eyes fixed on Marcus's vehicle. A luxury car. Dark windows. Black driver. The officer walked up to the driver's side window and knocked sharply. Marcus rolled it down halfway. "Good evening, officer," Marcus said calmly. "Is there a problem?" The officer didn't answer right away. He leaned slightly forward, peering into the car, scanning the interior. "License and registration," the officer said. "Now." Marcus nodded, keeping both hands visible as he reached for his documents. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" he asked, still calm. The officer's jaw tightened. "You were driving suspiciously," he replied. Marcus paused for half a second. "Suspicious how?" he asked. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he glanced at the Mercedes emblem, then back at Marcus. "Where are you coming from?" the officer asked. "Dinner," Marcus replied. "A business meeting." The officer raised an eyebrow. "What kind of business meeting?" Marcus handed over his license. "Before I answer any more questions," he said evenly, "am I being detained for a specific reason, or am I free to go?" That question changed everything. The officer straightened up. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Marcus looked at him, surprised but controlled. "Officer," he said, "I've done nothing wrong. I'm complying, but I'd like to understand." "Step out of the vehicle." Cars passing by slowed down. Marcus opened the door and stepped out onto the pavement. That was the moment the officer spoke into his radio. "Dispatch," he said, eyes still locked on Marcus. "I've got a possible stolen vehicle situation." Marcus froze. "A stolen vehicle?" he said. "This is my car." The officer didn't respond. What Marcus didn't know, what the officer couldn't possibly imagine, was that this stop would not end at the roadside. It would end in a federal courtroom. Marcus stood beside his car, hands relaxed at his sides, posture calm. The officer circled the Mercedes slowly, flashlight sweeping across the doors, the rims, the tinted windows, looking for something, anything, that would justify what he had already decided in his mind. "Who does this car belong to?" the officer asked. "It belongs to me," Marcus answered. "It's registered in my name." The officer scoffed quietly. "Aha," he said. "And how do you afford a car like this?" Marcus looked at him. "That's not relevant," he replied evenly. "My registration is right there." The officer ignored the paperwork. "Step back a little," he said, gesturing with his hand. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus complied. Passing headlights illuminated the scene. A couple walking their dog slowed down watching. Someone across the street paused on their porch. The officer spoke into his radio again. "Dispatch, run the plate again. Vehicle seems inconsistent with driver." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he said nothing. Minutes passed. The officer returned, his tone sharper now. "Dispatch says the vehicle was purchased recently," he said. "Cash purchase?" "Yes," Marcus replied. "From the dealership." The officer narrowed his eyes. "Cash, huh?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "Officer," he said, "am I being accused of something?" The officer stepped closer. "People don't just buy cars like this in cash," he said. "Especially not around here." Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "Are you saying that because of the car?" he asked. "Or because of me?" The officer's face hardened. "I'm saying something doesn't add up," he replied. And until I figure out what that is, you're being detained. He reached for his radio again. I'm going to need a second unit. Marcus nodded slowly. Understood, he said. Then I'd like a supervisor on scene. The officer laughed under his breath. You don't get to make requests, he said. Marcus didn't raise his voice. I'm not making a request, he said calmly. I'm asserting my rights. That's when the officer changed his approach. Turn around, he ordered. Hands behind your back. Marcus's head snapped up. Am I under arrest? He asked. Not yet, the officer said. But you're not going anywhere. Marcus hesitated for half a second, then complied. Metal cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. A woman across the street pulled out her phone. The second patrol car arrived moments later, lights flashing. The new officer stepped out, glanced at Marcus, then at the Mercedes. What's going on? She asked. Possible stolen vehicle, the first officer replied. Driver's story doesn't make sense. She looked at Marcus. Sir, is this your vehicle? Yes, Marcus said. And this stop is unlawful. She studied him more closely now, not just the car, but the way he spoke, the way he held himself. You have ID? She asked. It was already provided, Marcus said. Along with registration. She looked back at her partner. Did you verify ownership through the VIN? She asked. The officer hesitated. I'm working on it, he said. Marcus felt something shift in the air. Because at that moment, the second officer noticed something the first one had ignored. The court access badge clipped discreetly inside Marcus's jacket. Sir, she said carefully. What do you do for a living? Marcus met her eyes. I'm an attorney, he replied. Federal. The street went quiet. The first officer laughed. Sure you are, he said. Marcus didn't react. Call it in, he said calmly. You'll want to do that now. The second officer hesitated, then reached for her radio. And that was the moment this stop stopped being routine. The second officer stepped a few feet away and spoke quietly into her radio. Dispatch, she said. Can you confirm driver's identity? Marcus read, date of birth matches license. Also check federal credentials. The first officer rolled his eyes. This is a waste of time, he muttered. They always say that. Marcus stood there in handcuffs, face calm, breathing steady. Years of practice had taught him how to stay composed when pressure rose. Courtrooms did that to you. So did moments like this. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. Dispatch came back on the radio, and the tone was different. Unit 12, stand by. The second officer looked up. Stand by, she repeated. Marcus raised his eyebrows slightly. The radio crackled again. Unit 12, confirm you have Marcus Daniel Reed in custody. The second officer glanced at Marcus, then back to the radio. Affirmative. A pause. Then, Unit 12 subject is confirmed. He is a federally licensed attorney admitted to multiple U.S. district courts. Active clearance on file. The second officer's posture changed instantly. The first officer shook his head. That doesn't mean anything, he said quickly. Anyone can say they're a lawyer. The radio crackled again. Negative, dispatch replied. This individual has active federal court access. Badge number verified. The street seemed to hold its breath. A car slowed almost to a stop nearby. The second officer turned toward her partner. Why is he cuffed? She asked quietly. He was being uncooperative, the first officer snapped. Marcus spoke for the first time in several minutes. I complied with every order, he said calmly. I asked why I was stopped. That's not a crime. The second officer looked at the first one now, not accusing, but concerned. Did you have probable cause? She asked. He was driving suspiciously, the officer replied. She frowned. That's not a charge. The radio interrupted again. Unit 12, be advised. Federal court security has been notified. The first officer froze. What? He said. The second officer stared at the radio. Dispatch, repeat. Federal court security has been notified. Subject is scheduled to appear in federal court tomorrow morning. Silence. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, the cuffs biting into his wrists. For the record, he said evenly, I was on my way home to prepare for that hearing. The first officer's face flushed. This is getting blown out of proportion, he said. We'll just sort it out, Anne. Before he could finish, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A black SUV. Government plates. It pulled up quietly without sirens. A man in a suit stepped out. Then another. They didn't run. They didn't rush. They walked with purpose. The second officer swallowed. Who are they? She asked. Marcus looked at the SUV. Court security, he said calmly. And that, he added, nodding slightly, is when things usually get very serious. The suited man approached, eyes moving from the officers to Marcus's handcuffs. Who authorized this detention? He asked. The first officer opened his mouth and realized he didn't have a good answer. The man in the suit stopped a few feet from Marcus. His voice was calm, professional, controlled. Sir, he said, looking directly at the cuffs. Are you injured? No, Marcus replied. But I am being unlawfully detained. The man nodded once, then turned to the officers. I'm Special Agent Collins, he said. Federal Court Security. The second officer instinctively straightened. The first officer did not. This is a local matter, he said quickly. We had reasonable suspicion. Then articulate it, Collins interrupted. Right now. The officer hesitated. Well, the vehicle didn't match the driver, he said. Collins tilted his head slightly. Explain that. The officer glanced at the Mercedes, then at Marcus. It's a high-value car, he said. Recently purchased. Cash. Collins didn't raise his voice. None of that is a crime, he said. And none of that establishes probable cause. He turned back to Marcus. Mr. Reed, he said, do you consent to being handcuffed? No, Marcus replied. Then remove them, Collins said without hesitation. The first officer stiffened. Hold on. Remove them. Now. There was no anger in Collins's voice. That made it worse. The first officer slowly reached forward and unlocked the cuffs. The metal fell away. Marcus rubbed his wrists once, then clasped his hands calmly in front of him. Thank you, he said. Collins turned back to the officers. Who initiated the stop? He asked. I did, the first officer replied. Reason for stop? Suspicious driving. Collins looked at his notebook. Speeding? No. Lane violation? No. Equipment failure? No. Collins closed the notebook. So to be clear, he said, you stopped a citizen with no traffic violation, detained him, cuffed him, and called in a stolen vehicle based on assumptions. The first officer's jaw clenched. He matched a profile, he said. The words hung in the air. The second officer's eyes widened slightly. Collins looked up sharply. Say that again. The officer hesitated, but it was too late. Vehicles like that are often stolen, he said. And the area. That's enough, Collins said. He turned slightly and spoke into his phone. Yes. That statement should be noted. Marcus watched quietly. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about documentation. Another SUV pulled up, this one marked. A supervisor stepped out, face already tense. What's going on? The supervisor asked. Collins didn't answer immediately. He gestured toward Marcus. This man, he said, is a federally licensed attorney on record, on schedule for court tomorrow. Then he gestured toward the first officer. And this officer, he continued, detained him without cause, cuffed him without justification, and articulated bias on scene. The supervisor's face drained of color. Officer, he said quietly, is that accurate? The first officer opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Marcus finally spoke again. For the record, he said calmly, I asked multiple times why I was stopped. The supervisor closed his eyes briefly. Sir, he said to Marcus, I'm going to apologize right now. This should not have happened. Marcus nodded. I understand, he said. But understanding doesn't undo it. Collins looked at the supervisor. This stop is now part of a federal record, he said. And it won't end here. The supervisor swallowed. What happens next? He asked. Collins looked at Marcus. That, he said, depends on him. Marcus took a slow breath. For now, he said, I'm going home. He looked at the first officer, still silent, still standing there. But this, Marcus added quietly, will follow you. And it would. The next morning, the federal courthouse was already awake before sunrise. Security checkpoints buzzed softly. Marble floors echoed with footsteps. Lawyers in dark suits moved with purpose, folders tucked under their arms. Marcus Reed walked through the front entrance calmly. No handcuffs. No police. Just his briefcase and his badge. At exactly 9 a.m., courtroom 4B came to order. All rise. The judge entered and took her seat. Before any motions were heard, before any arguments were made, the judge looked down at the docket, then up at Marcus. Mr. Reed, she said, before we proceed, approach the bench. The room stilled. Marcus stepped forward. The judge lowered her voice, but it carried weight. I was informed late last night, she said, that you were detained by local law enforcement. Marcus nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The judge's expression hardened, not with anger but with precision. Was there probable cause? No, Your Honor. Were you arrested? I was handcuffed and detained. The judge leaned back slightly. Do you have documentation? Marcus placed a folder on the bench. Yes, Your Honor. Body cam logs, radio transcripts, and a federal incident report. The judge flipped through the first page. Then the second. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. She looked up. Who was the arresting officer? Marcus named him. The judge exhaled slowly. Interesting, she said. She turned to the clerk. I want the U.S. Attorney notified, she said. And I want internal affairs from that department present in this courtroom by end of day. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, he said. Is this relevant to today's matter? The judge looked at him. Counsel, she replied. The integrity of the justice system is always relevant. The courtroom was silent. Later that afternoon, a motion was filed. Not by Marcus. By the court. A motion requesting full body cam footage, stop and frisk data from the officer, prior complaints, supervisor review logs. By evening, Internal Affairs had responded, and what they found changed everything. 14 prior complaints. Same pattern. Same language. Same assumptions. All closed. All ignored. Until now. 3 weeks later, the federal courtroom was full again. This time Marcus wasn't at the bench. He was at the plaintiff's table. The officer sat across the room. No bite. No weapon. Just a man realizing too late that one stop had crossed a line. The judge spoke clearly. This court finds that the detention violated constitutional protections, she said, and that the officer's conduct warrants federal review. She paused. This case will proceed. Marcus didn't smile. He simply nodded. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. A microphone was placed in front of him. Mr. Reed, one asked, why pursue this case? Marcus looked at the camera. Because the next person, he said, might not have a badge in their pocket. And with that, the system that stopped him had to answer to the system that protects everyone. The lawsuit moved faster than anyone expected. Once federal court became involved, delays disappeared. Deadlines were firm. Excuses didn't matter. During discovery, the body cam footage was released. Frame by frame. Second by second. It showed Marcus calm. Respectful. Composed. It showed the officer escalating without cause. And it showed the moment that changed everything, the phrase he matched a profile. That clip spread quickly. First inside the department. Then to city officials. Then to attorneys. By the end of the week, the officer was placed on administrative leave. 2 weeks later, Internal Affairs reopened every prior complaint tied to his badge number. Patterns that had once been dismissed as inconclusive were suddenly undeniable. Same neighborhoods. Same vehicle stops. Same language in reports. During one closed-door deposition, the officer was asked a simple question. Would you have stopped this vehicle if the driver were white? There was a long pause. His attorney shifted in his seat. I don't recall, the officer finally said. The transcript recorded everything. That answer alone became evidence. City lawyers realized the danger immediately. This was no longer one stop. This was systemic exposure. The city attempted a quiet settlement. Marcus declined. "I don't want silence," he said. "I want accountability." The case went public. At the federal hearing, the judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "This court finds that the stop was initiated without lawful basis," she said. "That the detention was prolonged without justification. And that the officer acted under color of law in violation of constitutional rights." She looked directly at the officer. "Power," she said, "does not excuse prejudice." The ruling triggered more than damages. It triggered policy change. Mandatory body cam audits. Revised stop protocols. Federal oversight. 3 months later, the officer resigned. Not retired. Resigned. His badge was surrendered quietly. No ceremony. No farewell. Just paperwork. Marcus never celebrated. When asked why, he answered simply, "This wasn't a victory. It was a correction." And somewhere else, on another street, another night, an officer hesitated before making a stop, because now the court remembered. Months later, the street where it all began looked exactly the same. Same streetlights. Same quiet houses. Same stretch of road where red and blue lights once filled the night. But something had changed. Inside a police training room across the city, new recruits sat in silence as a video played on a screen. Not a dramatization. Not a lecture. Real bodycam footage. The instructor paused the video at the exact moment the officer said. He matched a profile. The room was quiet. That, the instructor said, is where a lawful stop became a federal case. In the back row, a young officer swallowed hard. Elsewhere, Marcus Reed stood outside a courthouse, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'll take the case." Another pause. "No," he added. "I don't do this because I enjoy it." He looked up at the building, tall, immovable, imperfect. "I do it," he said, "because someone has to draw the line." He ended the call and walked inside. The camera would never follow him again. No spotlight. No applause. Just the slow, steady work of making sure the law means the same thing, for everyone. Because power doesn't disappear. It just gets tested. And that night on a quiet road, one test became a reminder. The system is strongest when no one is above it. Not even the ones wearing the badge. And stories like this don't go viral because they're rare. They go viral because they keep happening. If this story shocked you, subscribe. Because the next one might be happening right now. And most people will never hear about it. This channel exists for one reason. To show what happens when power is abused, and when it's finally held accountable. Subscribe if you believe the law should protect everyone, not just the people wearing the badge.